Welcome to Man in America, a voice of reason in a world gone mad. I'm your host, Seth Holhouse. If you aren't aware of this by now, which you probably are, most of the three-letter agencies in our government have been heavily corrupted. Maybe some started off as being really good and magnanimous, and they've become infiltrated over time. But there's others that from the very inception, it's almost like they were created to do evil. Unfortunately, living in the country that I love, it's a sober reality to be facing, that our own government is involved in a lot of things that harm us, to put it lightly. One of those three-letter agencies that doesn't get a whole lot of attention is the CPS, the Child Protection Services. It's easy to go on about the FBI or the CIA and the cover-ups and everything, but the CPS is hitting this country at the heart of what really matters, which is the children. Now, according to my guest today, Ryan Matta, good friend of mine, documentary maker, journalist, just fearless guy, he has a new documentary called Never in America. It's all about what's happening with the CPS and the information, the statistics, the numbers, the interviews, the information that he has to present is absolutely insane. I mean, what's actually, as we'll discuss in the show today, that literally our own government, through the CPS, is kidnapping hundreds of thousands of children a year, taking them from families. Now, I'm not going to discount and say that, every parent, regardless of how bad they are, deserves to have their kids. There's some parents, say they're crack addicts and the kids are, sitting in a dirty diaper for days on end in a crib. Yeah, that kid should have a better opportunity at life than being born into a crackhead family. But as we're going to talk about in today's show, that's oftentimes not the kid that's being taken. These kids are being taken from homeschooling families, from solid, good people, from Christian families, that these kids are being taken almost as if there was some sort of agenda to destroy the nuclear family in America. And this is one of the things they've been doing to achieve it. And so in this discussion with Ryan, we're going to be focusing on a handful of things. One is a particular case, little baby Cyrus, and what happened with this baby that was taken from his parents, but also taking a much broader look at the child trafficking industry, the government's involvement, how it works, what role the CPS has, why the foster system is so important in funneling these innocent children into the cartels and the gangs and all the different criminal organizations that are then selling them. And so this is going to be a conversation, as you could probably imagine, that is going to be a little bit heavy. If you have kids watching, I wouldn't recommend this one for them. I think that Ryan, we just finished the interview. I think he says a few swear words towards the very end. So just warning you, because I try to be more PG. But sometimes if there's a passionate moment, I can't always control my guests, and I respect him for just speaking his mind. But just kind of giving you a little warning there. But I hope that I'm not gonna say I hope you enjoy this discussion, because it's not like enjoyable, but it's important. I hope you can listen to this and walk away with something very valuable. Also, Ryan has a new documentary, which I mentioned, which I'll make sure is linked in the description below, because that's the ultimate tool that we have, right, is educating people. And when people like Ryan put together these documentaries that kind of pull back the veil of these organizations, it's really important that we help that information get to more people. And that's one of the main reasons why I do this show and why I'm covering the topics like this that you won't be finding on a lot of the big kind of approved podcasters, right? This is a topic that's not easy, but it's really, really important. So I guess, not going to say enjoy the show. Take what you will from it. I hope that it moves you. Before we jump in, though, a few quick notes. First off, if you are watching on Rumble, thank you so much for supporting a free speech platform. Honestly, Rumble is just amazing. So if you're watching on Rumble, make sure that you're subscribed to my channel. Make sure you hit that little subscribe button up there, or the follow button. Thumbs up. Hit the thumbs up if it's good for you. Leave a comment. I'd love to see that. And just a quick update. So I know that, for people who have been following, I'm very, very close to launching the ARC community. My father passed away about 2 weeks ago or so, somewhat unexpectedly. It kind of threw a wrench into things. I had a lot of trips back and forth to Ohio as he fell ill. However, we're still moving ahead. So if you've been waiting for the ARC community, it's you can check out the website. It's Build the ARC. That's Build the and ARC, which is ARK.com. I won't get into it right now, but basically we're launching a private member-only paid community. It's going to be affordable. I think we're starting at $1 a month, right? But anyway, it is a place where you have access to build relationships, have access to information for preparedness and so much more. But most importantly, it's about building a community of people that you can trust. And as you're watching this interview unfold, it's like these are the kinds of communities that you need to have access to. So that if you have an issue, that you can reach out to the people that are local, people that have influence, and get support. So anyway, if you want to learn more about that, buildtheark.com. You can just sign up your email on the waiting list. And as soon as we're launching, which is literally the next couple of weeks, and I've been saying that, but we had a few delays, we'll make sure you know immediately, because it's going to be a very, very, very important initiative that we're doing. So again, it's buildtheark.com. So let's dive into this interview with Ryan Matta. Ryan Matta, man, it's been quite a long time since we've done a show together, but I'm really looking forward to this conversation. So thanks for being here. It's good to have you on.
Seth, brother, thank you so much for bringing me on, man. You know, anytime I need to get the word out or I have something really important, man, I can just reach out to you and you're like, yeah, let's do it, man. You're always willing to step on stage with me and speak about the stuff that nobody else wants to seem to talk about. So I appreciate you, man, and glad to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, it's important. You're a journalist, you're an influencer, which I'm not really a fan of that term. It's like, oh, you're an influencer, but you influence the culture, you influence society. And what I've seen from you is that you're not scared, whether it's touching on the really touchy subjects of human trafficking or Israel or COVID or whatever it is. You're very fearless in pursuing the truth, which is important, because I think more than ever what we've seen now is that even a lot of the voices that had a lot of our trust 1 or 2 years ago have now shown who they are. So I think that we're kind of, if you have a whiteboard, you're kind of ticking off the people. It's like, oh, yeah, that's controlled opposition. That's controlled opposition. You're left with a pretty small list of people that will just report on what they believe is true and important to cover, and not those that are secretly pushing some kind of agenda. So I commend you for that.
No, man, it's so crazy that you say that, because it's bizarre, is it not? It felt like under the Biden administration, at least we had all hands on deck. It was like all of us, everybody that had a microphone was raging against the machine. We were exposing government corruption, and we weren't even afraid to go after the corrupt Republicans. Now it's like, if you go after the Republicans, you're going after Trump. And it's like he has this group of loyalists. It's almost like the powers that be have created their own sect inside the conservative influencer space that they control. And I've heard that Trump even has like a war room at the White House and at Mar-a-Lago where they built like 100 monitors, and he's got all these networks and all these social media platforms. And it's almost like they specifically wanted him to follow a set group of influencers. So that way, when Trump logs on to X, I don't think he hears and sees what we, the people, are actually saying. I think he's following like the Laura Loomers, the Benny Johnson. Right? So he's getting a taste of, but
cat
he's just
turd.
getting like, yeah, cat turd for sure, dude. So,
yeah.
It's weird.
Well, I think you really saw it happen with Charlie Kirk. And it was like amazing to witness this, because you had the same people that looked at, say, George Floyd and were saying, this is not the real story. There's so much more that's happening here. This is some sort of psychological operation. This is a false flag, whatever it was. Also, the people that were questioning everything, they have questioned everything since, say, 9/11 or any of these big events. And these same people are now all of a sudden, like, whatever the three-letter agency says is absolutely true. And if you second guess it, you're anti-American, you're anti-Israel, you're anti-Trump. It's like all of a sudden, it's just like, wow, it's like you magically trust all of these three-letter agencies that, like, really since their inception have been built on lies and corruption and who knows what else, all kinds of black budget stuff. And then, Charlie Kirk, you have it. And it's just, to me, that was one of the dividing lines. It's like, it's one thing to come out and say, hey, it was 100%, it was this country that did it, right? Okay, so maybe it's not that black and white. Maybe it was, it's never just one country. It's always the intelligence agencies, which are, multinational, and they're working with the global corporations, et cetera. But just to say that, nope, it was a lone gunner, and if anybody questions the lone gunner narrative, you're a conspiracy theorist. I just thought, oh my, is this like Kennedy 2.0? It's wild.
Dude, I call them like the FBI or the White House water boys, right? It's because it's like they just do nothing but carry weight for this administration. And it's like, nobody believes it, man. Like the kid was, whoever took that shot or whoever was laying on top of the low C building was in a full sprint in literally less than 3 seconds. Charlie Kirk was the man of steel. Like the conspiracy theory is the FBI's narrative of events, right? Like if you start to like actually critically think about it, you're like, wait, none of this makes sense. But like you said, if you speak out against it or you question it, like you're the most anti-American, anti-Trump person in the entire world. What does Cash Patel call us? He calls us anarchists. Yeah, you're an online anarchist. Like, okay, yeah. Cash.
Well, the thing is that like whether it's Cash Patel or Dan Bongino or any of these people, it's not like I look at them and I think that, oh, they're just part of the deep state and they're bad and evil. I look at it and saying like they're within a system that has so much control and so much power that they're helpless. As much as I look at, say, it's like Cash and say, gosh, why isn't he doing this? Or why is he doing this? Or why is he talking about like this way? Like, who's feeding this whole 33 hours type thing? And it's easy to kind of direct a lot of your anger towards someone like that. But we have no idea what kind of, whether it's blackmail or control or who knows what it is. I mean, these agencies are just like, they're a pit of vipers. And so that's the thing, is that it's not like we're coming and saying, oh, these people are all deep state evil. It's like, hey, can we at least rationally take a step back and say, well, it looks like maybe they're also being controlled by this system that we're trying to dismantle. I mean, it's a massive, massive system. So anyway, I'm kind of going off on a little tangent there, but it's nice to have this conversation with someone I think that sees eye to eye.
Oh, absolutely, man. Yeah. And it's Cash is like, he wrote a book called The Government Gangsters. Dan Bongino was begging Trump, just please put me as a director of the FBI just for 24 hours. So any one of you FBI agents who hasn't come out as a whistleblower as of September 1st, we're going to give you another 2 weeks. And if you haven't, I swear I want everybody, he's basically going for heads and, basically saying that these guys are going to never work in our government again. And then they met with also, a lot of people don't know this, but, I was friends with Kyle Seraphin, Garrett O'Boyle, you interviewed these, Stephen Friend, all the FBI whistleblowers, right? Well, Cash, once he got nominated, reached out to them and was like, hey, if we're looking to really, dismantle this, you guys know the FBI better than anybody. How would you go about it? And they gave like a foolproof plan on like where you'd move agents to. These are the rules and the laws of the FBI. You can't force them to quit, but you can, basically move them to Alaska and force them to work in the Eskimo crew. And like, they'll basically resign. You can do all these things to eradicate and get rid of the corruption in there. And they haven't done any of it. And that they brought back, we're supposed to be, Kyle made such a big deal about Garrett and Steve not being reinstated. They got to Susie Wiles and allegedly Susie Wiles, called up Cash and was like, what are you doing? Reinstate these guys. So then Cash put out held a press conference and said, hey, we're reinstating the FBI whistleblowers, blah, 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 blah. To this day, that was like 2 or 3 months ago. They still haven't been brought back. They still haven't received their back pay and nothing has changed. So it's like everything that this administration tells us is a lie. And, we could talk about the Epstein list too, which is, I think is the biggest embarrassment. I think at the very least, we thought that if there was one thing that this administration was going to do, it's going to be to declassify the Epstein files and actually get those out in the open, let everybody learn for themselves. And now just yesterday, a story broke about how Bongino was approached, according to some emails that got leaked. Bongino was approached in March to help cover up the Epstein files. So I don't know. I don't know where this goes.
I think if there's one takeaway, that the system is so corrupted that, and I'm not kind of speaking, I'm not calling on it, kind of violence or action, but it's like, I think by its own weight of corruption, it will collapse. It kind of has to, right? It's like the only way forward is we need a new system. We need something that's like, there's no way of kind of coming in from the outside and trying to fix it. Even if Trump and Cash and Bongino and all these people had the absolute best of intentions, what happens when you show up to fight the army with your 300 amazing soldiers and they've got 10,000 soldiers and tanks and nerve gas and everything? It's just like, maybe it requires something much greater to win that war. And that's kind of how I'm looking at it. So for me, it's just like, okay, pay a little bit less attention to the talking heads in DC, which I ignore most of the time anyway. Focus on just being prepared, focus on my family, focus on doing the things that I can do.
Yeah. And how do you go, like, how would you even go about that? Right. Would you have to, it's like our politicians, like, let's just use somebody like Matt Gaetz or Thomas Massie or MTG. Like, we do all of the work over a couple year period, helping get the right person into office. And then all of a sudden, you could even use Speaker Mike Johnson, right? When we ousted McCarthy, we thought MAGA Mike. I mean, that's what his nickname was, MAGA Mike, because he's always voted. He had like a great voting record. His Liberty score was like 100%. Like, that was our dude, right? He was going to come in there, clean house. He goes into a skiff with Paul Ryan and walks out, holds a press conference and talks about how his first job as speaker is going to be sending our money to Israel. And it's just like, what is so powerful that they have in that skiff or inside DC, where these men, doesn't matter how great you are, it's almost like our intelligence agencies have every crime that you've ever committed, every dick pic, every email, every text message, all on a file for you, just in this skiff. So it's like, you think you're gonna run the show the way you want to run your show, or you're gonna expose the bad guys, and then they come in there and they pull up your entire life history, and it's like, oh, maybe you don't want to go down that road. I don't know.
It's like crazy. The Stasi files, right?
For sure, dude.
And so, well, getting around to the 3-letter agency that's going to be the focus of our discussion today, CPS, Child Protection Services. Ladies and gentlemen, our world is being poisoned. Every day we're exposed to more chemicals sprayed into our skies, leaching into our food, and polluting our air and water. From pesticides and heavy metals to hormone disruptors and synthetic additives, these toxins are bombarding our bodies and silently destroying our health. But there's something you can do to fight back, and it starts in your gut. Kimchi 1 from Brightcore Nutrition contains over 900 strains of beneficial probiotics that will help flush toxins, restore gut balance, and support your immune system. Because when your gut is strong, your body can resist. You'll feel the difference. Better digestion, more energy, clearer thinking, stronger immunity, and even improvements in your skin, hair, and metabolism. And this isn't just hype. Studies show that fermented foods like kimchi can reduce the risk of obesity, improve blood sugar, and support whole body wellness. Kimchi 1 is all natural, non-GMO, dairy-free, gluten-free, and 100% made in the USA by a company that actually cares about your health. And today, you can get an exclusive offer just for my viewers, 25% off with your code MANINAMERICA by clicking the link below. Or call my friends at Brightcore for up to 50% off your order and free shipping. So give them a call now at 888-575-6488, and their educated staff will make sure that Kimchi 1 is right for you. Again, that's 888-575-6488. All the links and information are in the description below. This is something that I think people that have been following human trafficking and just the overall corruption of the deep state and all its tentacles have well understood for some time now that CPS is quite complicit. Not everyone who works there, but probably certain people of power, et cetera, that are using this system for not just for extra money here. They're not like they're doing. It's not insider trading. It is much more sinister. And you recently released a very important documentary on this. And so if it's okay with you, we'll start by watching your trailer. It's about a 2-minute long trailer, and then we can dive into just wherever you want to take us on this topic.
Let's do it.
Okay, perfect. So let me pull that up now. So this is it's 2 minutes, almost 3 minutes, but it's well worth the time, I promise.
Say it's the greatest fear of parents to have their child taken from them. How in the world does it happen by force at the point of a gun?
We're not going to screw with you. You understand? Get out of the car.
Hey, you can't use me.
Give me the baby, okay?
I can't.
This one really made my stomach sink.
I can't even believe this story.
Cyrus, the 10-month-old baby who's been kidnapped, stripped from his loving parents by CPS.
No, go in the car.
Cyrus.
In the car. It's all right. It's okay.
Cyrus.
It's okay.
Cyrus.
No,
I don't want anybody to have to endure this.
The Baby Cyrus case was the second most viral case in American history regarding CPS.
The media is not really covering this because this is, in fact, medical kidnapping.
They claim that Baby Cyrus was underweight.
The kid has lost weight.
Take the baby away.
Get the baby out with CPS to the foster parents.
They were willing to release Baby Cyrus to a foster family.
I won't let him go.
It offers financial incentives to the states that increase adoption numbers.
There's billions of dollars to be had just from the federal government if you take the kids out.
They are profiting off of it.
There's nothing more evil, there's nothing more wicked than what I call child profiting systems.
Once a child is legally kidnapped, the child is far more likely to suffer abuse.
The most dangerous place to be for a child is in the government custody.
He literally has missed out on his childhood because of this.
In 10 months, I've never seen my grandson like this ever.
They just didn't even properly care for him.
It just looked like he was half dead.
That's the care that these animals are saying.
Protesters taking sides in a child welfare case.
We need more people out here. We need more people to stand for this.
I was extremely naive, and I thought there's no way that my son would be taken from me.
These are loving parents. They followed every instruction they were told, and they're being treated like criminals.
These parents, trapped in the system, become like refugees. They do not know what to do, and the loss of their children is devastating.
No man lives in freedom if you live under the constant threat of your child being taken away from you by force.
I'll do anything for Cyrus, for my son. I'll do anything for him.
I've seen this so many times. I can't be that next person. I can't.
Man, powerful trailer, which is it's what I've come to expect with anything you touch. So where do you want to start with this? Because what I'm seeing there is obviously one specific case that I'm sure extends well beyond that. But yeah, I guess I'll let you take it where it goes. Well, let me backstep. Walk me through what happened with Baby Cyrus. Actually, it's a good place to start, and then we can kind of go into the deeper system. what happened with this baby? Where is this case at currently?
Yeah, so this case is pretty much completely done. They were able to get their child back within 8 days, but that is the absolute anomaly. Almost never happens. You know, a majority of the time that if the parents ever see their child again, which 54% of the time they do not, they don't see them for within the first year. So it takes about a year of going through the system to get their child back. So what happened was, they're like your perfect all-American family. Like you could tell by looking at the videos, seeing the family talk, seeing how many people came together. Diego happened to be a pastor. He was a pastor for like 12 years. So talk about like your ideal family, huge community. They were really good friends with Eamon Bundy. Eamon Bundy was actually running for governor of Idaho at the time. So when this all went down, it started with their child had a disease called cyclic vomiting syndrome. So this is a rare disease. Very few children have it, and it's almost impossible to diagnose. And there's no cure for it. Okay, they normally just age out of it. And what that means is like your kid might be fine for 2 days, but then for 3 days, it'll vomit 10, 20, 30 times a day, just profusely. So the baby, until the baby was about 8 months old, it was on the mother's breast milk. So at 8 or 9 months, they decided to start trying to introduce some whole foods into the baby's diet. And then he started to develop this cyclic vomiting syndrome where you just go on these, 2 or 3 days where you just puke. But the parents were always there taking care of him. He was never laying in his crib. So basically the parents had to be on the baby 24/7 because if they laid down in the crib, he might, puke and then end up laying in his puke. So they were constantly always having to watch him and take care of him. And then a few months later, it got to a point where, he had been like 3 days and they took him to their natural doctor. And the doctor's like, hey, you might want to take him to, St. Luke's or whatever hospital that they were going to. So they took him to the hospital and, talking to the nurse, and everything was completely cordial and normal, that they were running a bunch of tests and trying to see if they could figure out what was wrong with them. And then one day they started talking to one of the nurses there, and she said, hey, like, I'm noticing that you guys are behind on your vaccines, and I'm not seeing any childhood vaccines. And they go, yeah, we don't believe in vaccinating our child. And she goes, oh, and she said that was like the point when the entire demeanor of the conversation instantly shifted. Oh, well, in that case, I'm going to need you to go to basically these classes, if you will. So you just basically take your babies, you go to like 3 classes, you take them there, you weigh them. You're supposed to give them some Tylenol, which is really weird. They basically mandated to give their baby Tylenol, which we know how detrimental that is to your kid. So they had this regiment that they have to follow, and then she'd have to go to this weigh-in class in the morning and take some class. So there was 3 classes she had to go to. And now, again, they're going through all this. As a parent, imagine how stressful this is. So on the 3rd day, she woke up, she had a migraine headache, she felt like crap. And she's just like, hey, I'm going to call in. can I reschedule this? So she called to reschedule it and nobody answered. So she just left them a voicemail saying, hey, I'm sick. I'm not going to make it in today, but I can make it in later or whenever I can reschedule for you guys. And she fell asleep. And she woke up 4 hours later and it was like all hell had broken loose. CPS had been called. There was, tons of voicemails, blah, 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 blah. So they decided that, instead of just dealing with this, like we're just gonna get up and move out of town, right? We're not charged with anything. We haven't broken any laws. We're not doing anything wrong. We have the ability to just up and move and completely get out of the state of Idaho, which they were already planning to move like 2 months later. So they just kind of like, hey, we might as well just move now and just get out of this, because that's what, the people that are experts in CPS, that's what they say. You have the opportunity to just up and move and leave counties and leave the state altogether. Just do it and they'll close the case. You won't have to worry about it. They don't want to have their kid legally kidnapped by our government. They've done nothing wrong, right? So that's how scary this is for parents. So they went and spoke with one of their best friends who was a sheriff for 20 years in Idaho. And they ended up going to have dinner at his house that night. They explained the situation like, listen, you guys haven't broken any laws. You're in every right to go. Just do what's best for your family. And you guys are going to start over. You might as well just go and start over now. They're going to move to Florida. That night, the local Idaho police contacted, I think it was like T-Mobile. They illegally geo-tracked their phones, found out where they were, and they staked out outside of that sheriff's house, outside of their friend's house that night. So when they got into their car, the dad didn't see it. They were all family dinner there. The whole family was there. And the dad pulled out first. And then when they were backing out of the driveway, way down in the distance, like hidden behind a street light, they could see what looked like a sheriff's vehicle. So when they pulled out of the driveway, those lights turned on, not the red and blue lights, but the regular lights turned on, and the car kind of pulled out in the road and started tailing them. So she called her dad and said, hey, Dad, we're getting tailed. We think they're going to pull us over. So the father was like, well, there's a gas station, a mile up the road. I'll meet you at that gas station. Don't pull over on the side of the road where there's no lights, pull into a public area and stop there. So, and he's like, call Eamon Bundy. So they called Eamon, and Eamon's like, I want every single person in that vehicle to pull out their cell phones and start recording. And that's how, in the documentary, how you were seeing them getting ripped out of the car and all that evidence. So, that night at gunpoint, they basically were surrounded. I think there was a total, I believe, don't quote me on the number. It was 18 to 20 squad cars for one family three siblings, a father and a baby. They needed 20 squad cars there to rip these people out of the car at gunpoint. The sister was sitting in the front seat and the cops mistaked her identity and they thought that was the mother. They basically ripped her out of the door, out of the window, and then they put her up against the car and she's like, what am I under arrest for? What did I do? And they're like, child endangerment. And she's like, what child? The cop goes, your child. She goes, I don't have a child. The cop goes, oh, that's not your baby? Well, why didn't you tell us that? And she's like, well, why wouldn't you do a better job at being a cop and know that before you ripped me out of the car window and said I'm under arrest? And they arrested her anyways on almost no charge. I mean, she didn't break any laws. They said they thought she was the mother. They ended up arresting her. And then the mother of baby Cyrus, they walked her over to the ambulance and they had the ambulance there and the doctors are checking on the baby and, taking the vitals. And the cop comes up. She's like, you're going to have to give us your baby. And she's like, well, I can't do that. And she's like, am I under arrest? He's like, you're not under arrest now, but if you don't give us the baby, we're going to arrest you and we're going to take the baby. You can do this the easy way or the hard way. She's like, I just can't, as a mother, I just can't, I know what you guys are going to do with my child and I just can't give him to you. He goes, oh, hey, you're under arrest, hand over the baby. He goes, if you don't hand over the baby now, we're going to take it at force. So it's in the best interest of you to hand over the baby. So she hands over the baby to the nurse or whoever was there, the EMT. And then the guy goes, oh, yep, put her in handcuffs, you're under arrest. She's like, but I just gave you the baby. He's like, I don't care. You wanted it the hard way, you're under arrest. And the mother and the sister were arrested. The husband was able to get let go. They took him down to the station, booked him. And then Diego, the grandfather, had to bail them out. And then within 12 hours of that happening, they had staged a protest out because they took the baby then to St. Luke's Hospital because obviously the parents were so neglectful that they had to take the baby to the hospital and get him whatever care. They couldn't stop it from vomiting. And she's the only one, the baby can only consume the mother's breast milk, right? So there's no giving it extra food or consuming or keeping anything down. You put anything else into it with the mother's breast milk, it's going to profusely vomit. So they took it to the hospital and then the family showed up there. And then Eamon Bundy was obviously running for governor, had a big network of people in Idaho. I think they had almost had 400 people outside of the hospital. Within 24 hours, they had over 1,000 complaints sent into the hospital about, you've kidnapped baby Cyrus. Huge outcry. Stu Peters got onto it. Diego got on, I think, 50 podcasts over that month period. And they were able to create so much public outrage that one day, it was about 8 days later, they were actually filming an interview. And I think Stu Peters was actually going to do the documentary. He did do the documentary called The Little Things or The Little Ones. And he went down there and interviewed the family. And while interviewing the family, they got the call that said, baby Cyrus is coming home and all the charges are going to be dropped and end of story. So we thought. To this day, the Diego and Eamon Bundy has lost about, I think it's like $7 to $9 million in lawfare and lawsuits from St. Luke's because St. Luke's claims that their protest outside the hospital forced them to shut down the doors because there were so many dangerous, violent domestic extremists outside of the hospital. Peaceful protesters, mothers, fathers, and grandmas were so violent and dangerous that they had to shut down the hospital. And because they shut down the hospital for that day, it cost them about $50 million in damages. So they've been relentlessly going after this family after they couldn't kidnap their child, relentlessly trying to destroy this family. And that's kind of where they're at today. And luckily, Diego has been fighting this. I forget, he gave me an analogy. It was somebody who had basically like 4 lawyers. He's a YouTuber and he's been kind of getting hit with some lawfare stuff. He has 4 full-time attorneys. The guy's worth millions of dollars. And these 4 full-time attorneys or law firms have been fighting 400 basically independent. Because when they sue you with one lawsuit, there's like sub lawsuits in it. So they had 400 things that its attorneys had to file. Diego has a stack of 800 and he's been fighting it all by himself and doing it all by himself because if he didn't do it by himself, he couldn't afford it. They would have bankrupted. He would have lost his family, would be homeless right now. And he has a huge family. He's got 5 kids, that Marissa and Mariah, those are the, Marissa is the baby Cyrus's mother. And then Miranda is the oldest one, the older sister. And he's also has 3 other sons. And they're a great all-American family. Should have never happened to them. And then they did exactly what I think any parent would do, right? If that was our grandson, if that was our child, as a father, as a grandfather, you would have done anything. And I mean, gone to any lengths. So a peaceful protest, I don't think is out of the cards for any of us to try to do something like that to get our kid back. And yeah, they got their kid back, but now they're still to this day, 4 years later, facing lawfare that would bankrupt and destroy any of us.
Gosh, what a crazy story. And there's one thing that comes to mind with this is that there's a lot of people that are, back the blue and, constitutional sheriffs and hey, our police force will protect us. And there's definitely a lot of good police officers over there. And overall, I'm like very much so in support of the police force, right? However, there's a lot of people that will just take orders. And this is what my mind was going through when they pull out of that sheriff's house and they went to the gas station and had, 20 some odd, cop cars, squad cars there. those people are just following orders. And that's the thing, is that it doesn't matter. You look through history, a lot of just average people did atrocious things because they were just following orders. And so just a good reminder just of where the country overall is at. So this is obviously just one specific case, one specific example, which is already so mind-blowing to think this could be happening in America, right? I'm a father, you're a father. I can't imagine someone taking my child away. I mean, if some stranger took my kid away, I would, if I got a hold of them, it's like, it wouldn't be pretty. You know what I mean? It's just, I'm not a violent person, but I'm a father, right? And I've got that fighting spirit in me to protect my kids, right? And so what is, like, as you dug into this, because I know that you've done extensive research and documentation surrounding human trafficking in general, what are the dark secrets of the CPS? What's really going on there with child protection services?
Yeah, so it's a really interesting, and it reminds me a lot of how we explained, the trafficking of the immigrant children that were coming across our border, right? So you have all of these different government organizations, or organizations within an organization, right? So like when the migrant children were coming across the border, right, they were getting received by Border Patrol. So the Border Patrol agent was the guy who's seen that the kid had a name tag on him, or he had a phone number written in permanent marker. And the Border Patrol agent's job, like, I'm just doing my job, is to take that information that was on the minor child and put it into his file as a sponsor. And then he would call up the NGO, and the NGO would come and pick up the child and transport it to HHS. So the NGO was, hey, I'm just moving the child. I'm just doing my job. I'm just transferring the child from Border Patrol to HHS. I'm not doing anything wrong, right? And then HHS's job was to basically determine if the child was being trafficked. They were supposed to ask them a bunch of questions, and then they were supposed to do a little bit of a vetting and try to reunify the child with his quote unquote sponsor. Now, HHS is oblivious to the fact that this sponsor was actually written on the child's arm in permanent marker, right? So they had no idea what the kid looked like when it arrived. They just see the kid and he's got, a gray sweatshirt on and gray sweatpants like all the other kids, because they came over in rags and they were given new outfits and they were fed a little food and they got a, shower and got a little bit cleaned up before they actually seen the caseworker. So the caseworker is oblivious to this. And then the caseworker, basically sends the child off to the NGO again for the long-term care while they wait to coordinate the delivery with the sponsor. And then once HHS vets the sponsor, they call the NGO and say, hey, we need you to deliver Sally over to Seth in, Idaho or wherever. And the NGO goes, okay, I didn't vet the adult. So like right when they're delivering this child and they deliver to somebody and like the home doesn't look good or the area or something about the man is off, it's just like, it's not my job to vet the person. It's just my job just to deliver the kid. So the system is so decompartmentalized that each person doing their job doesn't really understand, or at least in the beginning didn't understand, until you really started, like people like myself started to investigate and put out our documentaries, and you put all the pieces together and you step back and look at it and go, holy crap, this is a giant for-profit government funded child trafficking syndicate, and it's firing and operating on all levels. And the part about that, and why I wanted to tell that first, is because when me and JJ were traveling across America and we're uncovering this leviathan of child trafficking that's being ran by HHS, I just couldn't wrap my head around it. How is it possible that our government went from never trafficking children to all of a sudden a system that's designed so perfectly that even senators couldn't get into the facilities that were funded with our tax dollars and were actually trafficking and molesting the children inside them? So you look back and you go, oh my gosh, because it wasn't their first forte in child trafficking, it was CPS. And CPS got in the game in 1997 when Bill Clinton, and championed by Hillary Clinton, created what's called the ASPA Act. So prior to 1997, states didn't have a funding apparatus to create organizations like CPS. They had, the sheriff would go to your house, and if you beat the kid, they would take you and they would try to find some type of foster care or some type of group home or some type of foster care parent or a relative or somebody to take the child in, because the state wasn't building these giant, there wasn't this giant funding apparatus for it. So Bill Clinton, there it is, the America's Safe Families Act, right? And that in 1997 basically creates a giant kitty of money, a giant pool of money, pretty much during COVID. So remember in COVID, right? The federal government didn't have all this authority over the states, but if they wanted to access, if each state wanted access to that money or that funding, they had to ratify their state constitution and give the federal government that authority. So that's what Bill Clinton did. And you hear it in this documentary. I mean, brags about it. He's like, oh, the system's working so good, we're even running out of money, right? We just need more funding. So at the state level, what the state did is they go, okay, we're going to create what's called somewhat like a quota system, right? So each different department, so let's use the sheriff's department, right? The sheriffs only get access to their portion of that money if they physically separate the child from the parent. So when a caseworker decides she wants to take your kid, she calls up a sheriff and says, hey, I need to go remove, Johnny from Seth. Cop says, oh, well, The caseworker's telling me I need to do it. I got to do it, right? So the cop shows up. And once they physically separate that child from that mother, they check that box. And they might have 20, might have 30, might have 50. It just depends. Then, the common thing is, well, what if there aren't 50 bad parents? Well, that's how you get a system where, according to an audit in 2019 done by CPS ordered for some odd reason on their own internal audit. That audit showed that 83.3% of the time, CPS was in the wrong. Meaning whatever justification that they had for coming in and taking your child, they actually investigated it and they got down to the bottom of it. It didn't hold up. So 83% of the time they're in the wrong. Now, last year, 480,000 children were taken by CPS. That gives you a number, 83% of that's roughly 390,000 children. They should have never been separated from their parents, but for some reason were separated from their parents. 54% of the time, they never see their child again. That's 215,000, roughly 92 children that are ripped out of loving parents' arms that should have never been ripped out and will never see their parents again. Now, this is where it gets crazy.
Hold on, so I'm going to comment really quickly here. And hearing these numbers, it's insane. And sometimes you can't see the forest through the woods, right? You have to take a step back and really see. And as I'm hearing you describing this, I'm thinking, I live in a country where we're always being told how free we are, right? I think that's part of how they keep us enslaved. They're always telling us how free Americans are. But I live in a country where the government, the actual government, is literally kidnapping hundreds of thousands of children from their parents and then sending them off into some system, which we'll get into the details of what happens next. But just that one simple thought, that our own government is kidnapping hundreds of thousands of children from their parents. You'd think that we're living in, I don't know, like communist
Ukraine.
Cambodia or something. You know what I mean? Like you think we're living in North Korea or whatever, we perceive it to be. That's insane to consider that. It's our own government. It's like one thing, again, to be corrupt and have insider trading and all this kind of stuff. But the fact that our own government, these agencies that often are being paid through taxpayer funding, are literally kidnapping the children of the citizens of this country. It's mind-blowing, just to put it in such simple terms.
Oh, it's beyond, it's hard to put into words on just like when I say that CPS is the most evil and vile, corrupt government organization, that's saying a lot, right? Considering we know what the CIA has been up to, we know what the FBI has been up to, but it takes it to a different level. If you're, I guess, like the CIA is into trafficking children and they're trafficking children that are coming across the border, these migrant children, or they're kidnapping these, kids off the street or whatever. I mean, these are children that they're kidnapping from loving American parents, And the scariest part about the system is everybody hears the horror stories about, CPS got called and they didn't do anything. And it's weird that it's the homeschoolers, it's the anti-vaxxers, it's the Christian parents that are almost always on the lower poverty income scale that are targets of this system. And, no offense, but the black babies in the crack houses, where mom's smoking meth, they're just left there to fend for themselves. And CPS does nothing because CPS, maybe doesn't want to show up to a home, in Detroit on 8 Mile, where they're, every other house is abandoned down and, there's a crack house and a trap house 2 down the door and they don't want to go knock on that door and, get into it with that type of mother and try to take their kids. So those kids just get left in those abusive systems. And it's the kids that are, the good parents who live in, somewhat nice neighborhoods that end up having their kids taken from them. And they're taken at gunpoint. And then after they take your kid, the first thing that happens is the judge slaps a gag order on you. So now if you go and try to speak out, you're going to be held in contempt of court. You're going to go to prison or jail. And then they also dangle your supervised rights. So when they take your kid, you'll get maybe 1 day a week supervised visits for 1 hour, right? But if you speak out, if you make any post on social media, if you do anything but stay completely silent, then you are going to consider I think it's like a neglectful parent, and we're going to take away your rights. We're going to take away your visitation. And then all visitation is also dependent on the foster care parent. So they could say your kid, was supposed to clean his bed. He was supposed to make his bed by 8 a.m. and went in there at 8:02 and the bed wasn't made. So he lost visitation or he lost phone privileges this week. So your kid can't use his phone. And they take away your communication with your child. And they're sitting there lying to your child, telling your child, who knows what they're telling your kid about, why their mother isn't there. They have no idea if your mother canceled or if the caseworker told them that they couldn't see the child. So the kid's completely in the dark. And it's just like, whatever system we're taking these kids from, it's so much worse, whatever we're putting them in. And there's nobody speaks up against it because they can't. I put in my documentary in the comments, I said, hey, this is for you guys. I want you guys to each record a 1 to 3 minute video, 5-minute video, share your story, tell what happened. And I thought for sure that I thought there was going to be hundreds, if not thousands of parents pulling out their phone going, yep, they kidnapped my child. Yep, they did this. There are a few comments from anonymous accounts, but I thought it would be flooded. I haven't seen one. Not one parent was willing to step up. And I think that part of it is probably they're a little ashamed. They feel bad that they've allowed this to happen. And for whatever reason, they couldn't get their kid back. So even talking about it or discussing it is so heartbreaking. Some of them might be still battling. So they're afraid to speak out because if they say anything, they're worried that they're going to lose their kid. I don't know, but it's kind of shocking to me, the lack of amount of parents. When it's happening so often, you would think we would hear so much more about it, but we're not hearing about it because of the lawfare and the system that's created. It's designed to protect itself.
So I want to kind of play dumb a little bit with this. Why are they doing it? Right? Just a very simple question. Maybe it's so simple you might say it's a dumb question, but it's a really important question, right? Why? What is the motive for the CPS to kidnap hundreds of thousands of children?
I think it's where, if you take a look at what it's a really good analogy. It would take me a minute to break it down. So Bob, the gentleman that I work with that rescues the sex trafficked teenage girls in El Salvador, right? So in El Salvador, it's not uncommon for a female that grows up in this abusive system, right? Her mom's pimping her out when she's 11, 12, 13. So by 12, she's having her first kid. Then mom keeps pimping her out, has a second kid at 14, then another one at 16. Then she becomes an adult and kind of does her own thing. And she's got 3 kids and she can't find a man, or she finds a man, any man that'll take her in. And she goes, well, I'm going to keep this man. I'm going to give him a baby. So gives that man a baby, but the man doesn't want to take care of her other 3 babies. So those 3 babies kind of go and just kind of pushed out of the way. And before you know it, over a lifetime, that woman, because she just lives in this perpetual state of abuse, ends up having 12 kids. So what Bob realized when he started taking in these babies, he first started taking in the babies, just the babies. But he realized that if a baby doesn't get stimuli, their brain doesn't get enough stimulation the first 3 months of being a baby, that they develop permanent brain damage. Like, it's really important for a baby's brain to develop. So he goes, well, what if I can take in the mothers, right? And I can get the mothers in, and then I can get the babies the help that they need before they actually become babies, and then the mothers can raise their babies. And he just had this idea, and then it kind of spun into the House of Life. And we, thanks to people like you who brought me on to promote my documentary, we raised over $30,000, and he's expanding, and this operation is huge, and it's going to be the hallmark of what a child trafficking rescue organization should look like for the rest of the world. But the idea is that if he takes in one baby, let's just say the House of Life could take in 10 girls. If he takes in 10 girls, each one of those girls would have had 12 kids. And if those 12 kids have 12 kids and 12 kids and 12 kids in 36 years, just taking in 10 women can save up to 12,000, right? Like, that's how exponentially it grows. So here in America, what we're doing is we're actually not breaking that cycle. We're creating that cycle of abuse, right? So you'd go after what's like the number one thing that they're targeting right now is the nuclear family, and they have been for a while. So they've created this apparatus, this incentive for the government to basically target and destroy the nuclear family. And if they can go after a mother who has 3 kids and take all 3 kids and put them into foster care, you're instantly, if the mother can't get her kid back, I mean, how heartbreaking would that be for a mother? I don't know if I've ever dated a woman that would be strong enough to not spiral. And then as a father, I mean, I would be an alcoholic, a drug addict. I mean, my life would ravel apart. I wouldn't be able to live with myself. I wouldn't be able to look in the mirror. I wouldn't be able to stomach it. And that's me just not talking about how violent I might get as a father and what I might be willing to do to somebody that took my child, right? Like, that's all you have in this life. And if you're a good father, like, you would go to the end of the world to get your kid back, and you would never stop fighting for them. So I think it's just mainly is the big thing is the attack on the nuclear family. And then you also create this system that has ripples effects for generation after generation after generation. Like, the kids that are going through foster care, we can get into that in a second. And I'll read off some of these statistics and they'll blow your mind, because whatever environment we're taking these kids from, I don't feel like it's worse, because we see the results of what has happened.
Here's the hard truth. Every 6 years, your dollar loses half its buying power. That means a $100,000 savings account today could feel like $50,000 by 2031. And you see it every time you fill up your tank, buy groceries, or pay the bills. Prices are up. Your dollar's down. But there's a simple way to protect the value of your savings with something real, something proven: gold. An asset that holds its value over time. And that's why I trust Noble Gold Investments. They make it simple to protect your savings with physical gold or silver. No high-pressure sales, no call centers, just honest guidance, one-on-one support, and transparent pricing. And right now, when you open a qualified account, Noble Gold will send you a free 10-ounce silver American flag bar as a thank you. So head over to goldwithseth.com or call 626-654-1906 today to learn more. Again, That's goldwithseth.com or 626-654-1906. Don't just protect your wealth, preserve its power.
And even President Trump held a press conference last week. Actually funny, it was the day that my trailer went viral. 24 hours later after the trailer of this film went viral, Trump gets on and holds a press conference about how, you can judge a country, according to the Bible, you can judge a country on how it takes care of its children. And the children in our foster care have been forgotten and abused. And, that's going to change under this administration. And then the next day, Rep. Nancy Mays put out a statement by Melania Trump. So their solution for this horror system that we've created here is to give the kids iPads. And then when they turn 18, they're going to get special access to government jobs and maybe a little bit of schooling. So it's like you put kids into a system where there's, 80 to a 90% probability that they're going to be sexually abused in their life. You're going to destroy their family. And your solution to that is here's an iPad and a job at the post office. Great. Thanks, Trump. We're going to save the world here. So yeah, the system's broken beyond explanation, in my opinion.
You mentioned statistics, right? So of these children that are taken, I'm sure it's case by case, but is it most common they then enter into the foster care system? And what does that look like? And what then happens to them in the foster care system?
You have different, I guess, stages of this, if you will. So you have a temporary foster care parent. These are the parents who don't want to be long-term foster care parents. This is kind of their job. So they have extra rooms in their house. They can take as many children as they can. They're getting X amount of thousands of dollars a month per child. And every state is different. So you have CPS, you have DCSF, you have DCS. When I say CPS, I'm just encompassing all of them. Okay. And every state, again, is different. They have different guidelines. So if you're still fighting for your child, then your kid is going to one of the temporary foster care parents, right? So that's where they'll be. Like I said, most of them don't get them back for a year. So in that year period, they're staying with the foster care parent, and the mother has to go to, depending on what, maybe it's AA meetings, maybe she has to go to classes, maybe she has to go to parenting this, maybe she has to go to anger management, whatever they justify or they deem fit. The mother has to jump through all those hoops, and then you have to go to court date after court date after court date as you, as a single parent, are fighting this government that has unlimited funding, unlimited resources. The judges pretty much that oversee the child welfare system, that's their main role. There's so many of these cases that, as a judge, their full-time job is just hearing and dealing with these types of cases, So that's kind of where it starts out. Then you have the foster care group homes, right? So you have group homes where there might be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 kids in. And then you have the permanent foster care parents who actually, when the kid is taken by the state then can adopt that child out. And then one of these foster care parents can then adopt the child permanently. And then they're going to technically raise that kid until it turns 18 or it decides to run away, whatever the case may be. And so those are the three different phases.
Okay. And what are some of these statistics of what happens within the foster care system?
Yeah, let me read these. So this gets pretty intense here, right? So out of all the children reported missing who are likely sex trafficking victims, 60% were in foster care or group homes when they ran away. At least 85% of all commercial sexually exploitation of children, so the CSEC, which is like your child porn, your stuff like that, in New York, had a history of welfare. So 85% of the child porn and the kids in the child porn that they were recovering in New York, 85% of those children were from the welfare system. 63% of the 270 survived adolescents, so these are adult sex trafficking victims, reported that they had some involvement in the child welfare system while being trafficked. 50% of children who are sold into child sex trafficking in California had previous involvement with the foster care system. Over 80% of girls forced into child sex trafficking in 2010 had a previous interaction with public child welfare and family services. And then I could go on and on, so I was doing a little bit more research. So talking about right now, if you are a female and Kash Patel, the FBI is doing all these raids, these Operation Child, whatever, recovery, whatever their name of it is. And 50 to a 90% chance that if it's a female that Kash Patel rescues, that she had came from the foster care system. 50 to a 90%. With boys, it's like 40 to like 85% or something like that. It's absolute insanity. Now, it went on to say, so 24% of human traffickers, these are the people who are actually trafficking the children, meaning the adults who actually traffic the children, at some point in their childhood were in the foster care system. So not only does the foster care basically almost guarantee, there's over a 50% chance that if your child goes into this foster care system, that they are going to be sexually abused in their lifetime and or they are going to be sex trafficked at some point in their life. 50%. We're taking, like I said, 480,000 children, 215,000 never see their parents again. So that's over 100-something thousand children a year that are guaranteed to be sexually exploited as children because of at the hands of our government, because of the system that our government's created for these children.
Gosh. And so is it something where people that are working within this system that have access to these kids, whether it's the foster homes themselves, whether it's certain people that are working on placing the kids, do you see indications that people that are part of this system are actually just criminals and they're working in this system because it gives them access to these kids that don't have a father or a mother protecting them? Because that's when you talk about the dismantling of the nuclear family, what I'm seeing with that is that what you're doing is you're pulling these children out from under the protection of the parents, right? So for me and for you, even if I'm in a public store, like I have an eagle eye watch on my kids because I know that it only takes a second for that kid to get scooped up, and who knows what. So I am so vigilant with my kids in public. Now we live out in the country, we're on 7 acres, so they're outside all day, right? We live on a quiet road where our house is set back into the woods, so the kids are, like, oh, where are the kids at? I don't know. They're back in the woods or something, right? Like that to me, like that's great. Kids should have freedom, but when we're in a public place, they are not leaving my line of sight. And so it makes sense that in that system, without that parent looking over them, it's so easy to have them just disappear. It's like, oh, little Johnny ran away. Wait, 13-year-old Johnny ran away? What's that mean, right? I mean, I wonder how often that it was just him being sold off to somebody. It's so easy to say, oh, they ran away. But I guess back to the original question is, do you find that there's the people actually working in the system are heavily involved in child sex trafficking and child trafficking in general?
No, Seth, you made an amazing point. A statistic that I didn't read off. On average, of 55 children disappear from the U.S. foster care system every single day. Every single day. And like you said, it's such an easy, he just ran away and nobody's going to question it. It's a 13-year-old little girl. She was sassy. She's getting in trouble in school, getting suspended, and she just up and just disappears. Who's going to question that? You open up the bedroom window, you say, oh, yeah, window was cracked. She jumped out the window and take some shoes and throw some footprints down there in the dirt. And who's going to know otherwise, right? That's such a good point. Yeah, that's an easiest point. And you ask, do I think the system is attracting criminals? And I say absolutely, because if you think about this, right, like back in the day, like let's say even 10 years ago, prior to YouTube, prior to Google, prior to the internet, to figure out how to exploit a system like this, you almost had to have worked with inside the system to realize that it would give you access. But now with all the information out there, and you're a freak, you're one of these blue-haired weirdos that wants to get access to kids, you realize like that, hey, if I go up and I touch my niece or my nephew, there's a high probability that, their dad's going to find out and I'm going to end up in prison. But if I just play my cards right and I go and apply at any one of these foster care systems, at any one of these group homes, at any one of these non-governmental organizations like Southwest Key Programs, MBM Inc., that has access to all of these children, well, now I'm just giving myself access to an unlimited amount of children. And then you think about the minor children that were coming over from Haiti that speak some broken Haitian dialect that they don't even have a Google Translate app to communicate with that kid. You touch that kid, how is that kid ever going to tell on you? They wouldn't be able to. It's impossible. They can't even communicate with anybody with any type of tool unless somebody actually comes over from Haiti and speaks that dialect and then can translate back for you. So it's like the system that we've created here that was once designed to protect children is now attracting the most evil and sick pedophiles from all over the country. Like we should have a more rigorous standards to become a foster care parent than to become an FBI agent. Talk about background checks, lie detectors, all of these things should be put into place. And I almost think that even to be a foster care parent, that you should have to come in and go see some type of special, FBI style interrogation unit. You just stop in there once a week with AI. You could go sit in a booth and you could create an automated system. It could be like an automated phone booth at every local sheriff's department. You go sit in this booth. Nobody can hear the questions or hear how you're answering them. You look into a camera, you answer all these questions. And it should be able to tell if you're lying or not, just by, maybe you put like a sleeve around for your blood pressure or whatever. You sit there, answer 10 questions. It takes you 10 minutes and you go about your day. If you're a good foster care parent, you'd pass it every time. You'd have no problem doing it. And hell, we'll pay you an extra $500 a month or whatever, just to go take that thing once a month. There should be, with the technology that we have the ability to create a system that could prevent all of this. But again, it's like the system doesn't want to prevent it. I mean, I've laid it out in this documentary. Anybody in your audience that watches this film is going to see the most insane it's like a military operation, and it's firing on all cylinders, every department, every organization, and it's all designed to keep itself hidden. And the judges are in on it, the lawyers are in on it, The judges are benefiting from it. The lawyers are benefiting from it. The healthcare system is benefiting from it. The doctors, the nurses, the judges, every single person, the foster care workers, the caseworkers, they all are benefiting from it. And it's like Reagan said it, there's only thing more immortal. The closest thing to eternal life on this earth is a government organization, right? Like no government organization ever wants to relinquish its power or to get dismantled, because government employees have been working this thing since 1997. They're ready to retire. They got a nice cushy gig. They worked their way all the way up to the top. All they have to do is just keep checking the boxes and keep doing their job. And nobody's ever going to get held accountable. No government employee has ever been punished for anything that happens with inside of our government. So it's just like, I don't see how we fix this until we actually get it out in the open, put as much sunlight as humanly possible on it and say, hey, like, where is RFK? I mean, CPS falls under his branch, right? He is overseeing CPS. And if you want to save children, I don't know how you could, I don't know. When I make my phones, I go, okay, people are like, oh, why don't you talk about this case or that case? And I go, I just try to focus my energy where I think I could save the most children, right? And at one point, it was the 452,000 migrant children that had came across our border. And then that led me to, holy cow, 480,000 children, American children, are getting taken by CPS. Like if there's one animal, if there's just one government organization that Trump could demolish, right? That he should have all of the support from every single American citizen. Like Trump could come out, hold a press conference and say, as of today, we are going to figure out a way to demolish ASFA, because that's what we have to do. If you just repeal the Bill Clinton's ASFA Act, right? He's already talking about wants to destroy everything that Biden did with the auto pen. How about we start looking at what Obama did and what Clinton did? Clinton did this. This was a Clinton creation, and it's created a monster. The most evil part of our government is CPS, and Trump, with one executive order, could demolish the ASFA Act. And then you put it back on the state's job, right? Each state has to figure out a way to fund this. And when the states are trying to figure out how to fund it out of their own pocket, and there's no profits in it, maybe we get a little bit of change. Maybe we get better oversight. Maybe the system doesn't operate and with the checks and balances where there's a quota and they have to hit this quota so we can go back into this, kitty of government funding and get more and more and more and more. I don't know. I think that the experts that I talked to say ASFA, if you wanted to end this system, you have to go after ASFA, and it has to be completely repealed. And if you repeal that and you send it back to the states level, it'll go like it was before 1997, where there was almost no government funded child trafficking.
And so I'm kind of building these networks in my mind. So you have the children moving through these systems, you have the individuals in the systems that have access to these kids that are then pulling them out and feeding them into criminal networks, right? I'm guessing that, the lady that's a clerk at the local CPS office or, whatever, that maybe she's complicit in some way, but she's not the person that's, arranging the someone that wants to buy 3 kids for a night. You know what I mean? Like, I'm guessing she's just kind of a middleman, right? It's almost like you work in a factory of Nike shoes and you're pulling off a few extra pairs throughout your shift, selling them out the back door, and someone else is then taking them and retailing them somewhere, right? And so, in terms of like what this looks like in America and what this system looks like, I think obviously you've got two sides of it. You have the buyers and the sellers. It's kind of like drugs. It's not like there's an evil person that's selling a drug and a good person is buying a drug, right? If you're buying crack on the street, obviously I think that the person who's selling it is much more, probably should be in much more trouble than you. But if you're buying it, you're also choosing to participate, unless you live in like, Portland or wherever, and they say, hey, anything goes here. But because I remember when I interviewed Lee Dundas, and I've had a few different discussions with her on child trafficking, and she told me something that was very disturbing. She said they did some sort of, it was kind of like a study, but I think she was working with local law enforcement where they wanted to see what kinds of people were actually buying and willing to pay for underage kids. And so what they did is they had some sort of listing. It wasn't like a Craigslist, maybe it was Craigslist or Backpage or one of these websites that is commonly used to for escort services and whatnot. And so they had a post that was put out there that was basically, okay, hey, if you're looking for an escort service. And so they'd have, these men that would call up and say, hey, my wife's out of town all weekend and I'd love to have someone over for the evening on Friday. And so what they did though, is they had a few, that was like the first step. The next step is that they would contact that person and they'd say, hey, we don't have access to our regular girls. We do have a minor. So we have someone that's under 18 that we can bring instead. And then they would say yes or no. If they said yes, then they would contact them one last time. They'd say, hey, just so you know, I want to make sure you know that this is a whole different level of being illegal, right? If I'm going to bring you a minor, right? So this is a whole different level of criminality. Do you understand that you're asking me to bring you a minor, I just want to confirm. And if you're happy with it, of course, I'll bring a girl over for you or a little boy. And then certain people said yes, right? So what we're looking at is we're looking at the sales funnel, right? Of going from just your average person that wanted to have an escort, wanted a hooker to show up and have a good time. Actually, what would you guess? Maybe you're a little too knowledgeable. What percentage of men that started off saying, yes, I'd like to have a hooker, ended up actually going to the final step and saying, yes, I agree to have a minor come for to pay for sex from a minor? What percentage do you think made it to the very end?
Maybe 25, 35%?
50.
50.
Nearly
Oh my God.
50% of the people that showed interest in wanting a hooker completely agreed, even though they knew it was illegal, to have a child dropped off at their home. Insane. And the other thing that Lee told me, I was like, well, who are these people? Like, and she goes, look, there's this perception that people that are about buying children for sex, et cetera, that they're these disgusting, horrible creatures. And she's like, no. She's like, it's the local guidance counselor, it's the local sheriff, it's the local doctor. Like, these are a lot of times white collar, successful men, pillars of their communities. It's
Israeli
not just
spy chief. The Israeli spy chief.
Yes, exactly. And so it was just crazy. But the question I wanted to kind of bring in to ask you is, what network are these kids going into? Because I know that you've kind of pulled the hood on this whole thing and that you're looking at everything with it. Are they being sold to cartels? Are they being sold, like where are these kids getting, these kids that kind of disappear? What are they getting? What kind of life are they being sold into?
Well, when you talk about just statistic wise, right? After a child enters, like, so let's just say, let's use the runaway case where the foster care had the 13-year-old girl and he found a buyer, so he found a trafficker that actually wanted to take this child and put it into what they would call the child trafficking pipeline. Once it hits that pipeline and it's, ends up with a pimp or a trafficker, the child's life expectancy goes from 72 years to 24 to 36 months. And I'm being generous on that. I think the FBI will even tell you it's like 16 to 18 months because their poor, fragile little bodies can't handle the sustained periods of abuse, right? When a girl is of age and she's 18 and she shows up with a broken jaw, she can go, guy gets too rough with her, she can go to the hospital and say, I fell, I tripped, I was riding my bike, whatever the case may be, and the hospital can't say shit about it, right? If that girl keeps her mouth shut, the hospital can't really intervene. Well, when the 10-year-old girl or 12-year-old girl or 13-year-old girl shows up with a broken jaw, that's serious, right? Like, there are people that are going to get involved and, they're going to want to know where this girl came from, who is her parents, who has rights to her, and how did she end up with a broken jaw? Same thing with the 13-year-old girl ends up with, riddled with STDs. You think that she's just going to the doctor and the trafficker's just going to get her whatever chemical cocktail she needs and she can get back on the street. No, a lot of times they end up staying riddled with these STDs and they end up, getting broken bones and a finger broke and they don't get to heal right. And then after, extended periods of time, like the one girl that was rescued, one of the worst cases I heard, or one of the worst cases that I've had firsthand knowledge of hearing from somebody that rescued them, was this girl. She was chained in the guy's basement. One of the migrant girls that came over the border. She was chained in a man's basement for 2 years. I think he got her at 5. When they caught her, she was 7, or caught him, she was 7. She'd been chained in the basement for 2 years, and that guy was letting 7 to 10 men a day come in there and have their way with her. And then every night, at the end of the night, he would take her food and he would take her plate of food and dump it on the floor. And while she was eating the food off the floor, he would rape her again. And then after he was done, he would smoke a cigarette and he'd put a cigarette butt out on her arm. Every night he did that. When they found this girl, her arms were just covered completely in scars from all the cigarette butts that man put out on her arm. And he said, and the guy interviewed him and he asked him, well, why did he do that? What was your reasoning behind putting the cigarette butts out on her arm? And he said, well, because if you guys ever arrested me or she ever escaped, I wanted her to be reminded of how I savagely, brutally assaulted her every single night. So every time that girl looks down at her arms or looks in the mirror and sees those scars, the flashbacks of what that man did to her are going to be burned into her brain for all her entire life. She'll never have a normal life. She'll never probably be able to recover from that. She'll never trust a man. She'll never have a normal relationship. And that's just one of many cases. Like the girls that they found at the border, one of the girls was coming across and was actually a mother, a very beautiful mother. And she had her son who was 12 and her daughter who was 13 or 14. And they had gotten robbed by the Golfo cartel coming out of Panama. And we know this because she was in communication with the aunt. So the aunt was going to receive them when they got to when they finally got to America. The aunt had a place here and she was going to take them in. So when they got out of basically made it through the Darien Gap and into Mexico, they had been basically robbed of all their money. Everything that they had to come over here, the other cartels had taken from them. So they ended up in a bad part of Mexico where the cartel was like, you don't cross through this area without paying us. They owed them like $5,000 to get from lower part of Mexico, and the cartel would get you all the way up to the border. Well, the mother didn't have it. The mother was very beautiful. And she said she made a deal with the cartels. Well, cartels were like, well, you can come work for us in the red light district and work off your debt. And we'll make sure that your children, your son and your daughter make it to the border safely. The mother agreed. The cartels, 6 guys got into a train car with the boy and the girl. And the boy sat there and they watched them savagely, brutally attack and assault sexually his sister, to the point where her sister must have had some type of heart condition and she couldn't handle it. And she ended up passing away. So the son, 12 years old, watched his mother get taken by the cartels and then watched the cartel members rape his sister to death. And then Carlos was the one who received that boy. And the reason we know is because Carlos was telling us the one story that really always sat with me, because I talked to the aunt. You know, we were taking these kids from Texas all the way. I think this one was to Illinois or something. So we're flying through airports, and he's like, I got them for a couple of days. And, our job is just to keep the kids happy. So we give them an iPad, we give them ice cream. They want to go play video games in the airport. Like, we got cards, and we're just anything that these kids want to keep them happy, they get. And he's like, this kid was just super quiet, head down the whole time, didn't want to talk to me, didn't trust anybody, didn't want to say much, just had his head down, didn't want to talk to anybody. So when I dropped him off to the aunt, I just said, hey, I don't know what's wrong with, let's just say, Johnny. He's just very quiet, and most kids aren't like that. So I don't know what happened or what. And she goes, I'll tell you the story. And she told him the story of what happened. So there's no matter how bad you think it is, your audience thinks it is, whatever environment that these kids are in. Like, if you picture your worst image in your head of whatever's happening to one of these kids, it's 100 times worse. You should listen to some of like the Tim Tebow, Sean Ryan podcast, where they talked about, some of these kids being forced to eat razor blades. They put razor blades in their mouth, and then they force them to read the Bible while they sexually abuse them. So that way, anytime they think of God, they're remembering the time that they were savagely abused and forced to read the Bible. Like, there's no limits that these people aren't willing to go to, and I try not to go down too much of the adrenochroming or the child ritual sacrifice rabbit holes, because I don't need to. And a lot of people, when they start hearing that, they really put the blinders on. Like, I don't want to hear about it. And then it ends up doing the opposite. It doesn't get more people to pay attention to it. It gets less, because it's so evil and so graphic and so vile. But if we don't talk about it, like you think I wanted to come on your show today and talk about, how our government's trafficking children? I'd love to go talk about, how Trump's, foreign policies are putting billions of dollars back in the pocket of Americans, or how we're abolishing the IRS, or, we're auditing the Fed in Fort Knox, and there's all this extra money there. We're not going to have to pay taxes next year, right? Or anything of the sort. But that's not America. I go down to El Salvador, and I can't even find anything negative to talk about at all. Like, you walk off that plane, the second you get off that plane, every single person you walk by is all smiles. It's the most bizarre. Doesn't matter if it's the person pumping your gas. It doesn't matter if it's the girl flipping your burgers at Wendy's. They are so proud to, number one, have a job. They're making good wages for their standard of living there. They all have a bright future, because every day their entire government, everybody from the president all the way down to the Secretary of State in El Salvador, wakes up with one mission every day. And that mission is, how do we make life better for our citizens? So as a citizen of that country, every day you wake up, your life gets better. And I'll land it right here. I was in Walmart, Seth. This was like 2 months ago, and I was down in El Salvador. And like it's Latino countries, right? So you walk into Walmart, it's like a rock concert. They got, Christina Aguilera or Britney Spears, Beyonce bumping on the loudspeakers. And like, you go into the meat department, and they got like 2 giant speakers, and it's like a dance party. It's crazy, right? So I'm walking through, like, I was looking for a new pair of shoes or something, and some Katy Perry or something comes on. And next thing I know, I'm dancing through Walmart, and I like stop myself. I'm like, bro, are you fucking dancing to Katy Perry? I'm like, holy shit. I was in such a good mood. I was just not a worry in the world, just skipping through Walmart. And I was just like, and I made a video about it. And I was like, when was the last time anybody in America can say that they were in such a good mood because life was going so good, their government was making their life so much better, that they were just hopping in and skipping through Walmart? And I was like, I'd have to go back prior to COVID, before I started to wake up and realize how evil our government is. So it's like, you have those opportunities, but like we were kind of talking before this, I think the American dream is dead. I don't think, maybe it might be a black pill take, but like, this entire system, it no longer works. And now that everybody's like, it's like, once you pull back the curtain behind the Wizard of Oz, you're never going to believe that the Wizard of Oz is the Wizard of Oz, right? You're always going to believe it's the man behind the curtain. And we're kind of seeing the man behind the curtain. We're waiting for accountability, but it's just not coming. Now we're in the middle of a color revolution that's taking place right now. Every single, like from the Charlie Kirk assassination to the National Guardsman that got shot last week. It's like, is this real? Is this a psyop? Are we being played? Like, it's so hard to tell now. And we don't trust any government organization. So I don't know how much longer a system like this can survive, and I'll end it there.
Unfortunately, I agree. I do think, look, I'm not a pessimist. I'm an internal optimist. I really am. Like I always say, I get accused. My wife is always, she's saying, Seth, take off your rose-colored glasses, right? 'Cause I've always got them on. I'm like, well, yeah, that's pretty bad, but here's this good thing that's going on, right? That's just how I look at things. But I do think that we are in the kind of end of empire stage of the American empire. Not to say it's going to crash and burn and we're all going to die and it's going to be total anarchy. I mean, I have no idea what comes next. I mean, my personal opinion is something at the hand of God, that there's some sort of bigger picture that we don't see. But I do think that we're just at that state. I mean, look at what we're talking about right now, this conversation we're having right now, that I do think that we are, like, these are indicators of what it looks like as an empire is collapsing. It's just, look at the history. It's cyclical, right? You see it over and over and over again. And that's where we are. Now, thankfully, I do think there's a lot of good people in America. There's a lot of fearless people. You're seeing a huge resurgence in homeschooling and, just faith coming back to our country. However, there's still a lot of evil here. And the evil is in the bones and the DNA of most of the large institutions that control this country, whether they're overt or covert, out in front or the hidden hands. So I think it's just where we are. So as we're wrapping up, one thing I do want to do, I'll pull up really quickly here. You have on, and I'll make sure that this is in the description for the show. Your documentary is available for free. People can watch it over on X, on Twitter. I'll make sure that the link is on there. Do you have it up on Rumble or other places as well?
Yeah, actually, it's still up on YouTube too. So it's on YouTube, Ryan Matta News or Ryan Matta Media. You just search around. Never in America is the title of it, and that's what you said. You're like, this doesn't happen in America. You say this could never happen in America. Well, hey guys, it's happening right here. And if you want to see it, this is the best way right here. Thank you.
So I'll make sure that those links are easily accessible. I want to ask, as we're concluding, what people can do, but I'll give my quick answer to that. I'd say the number one thing is to educate people, educate ourselves, watch the documentary, share the documentary. We should be like so grateful for people like you that produce this kind of content that allows us to then distribute these ideas and help more Americans become aware. But I want to, from your perspective, people watching, they see this terrible thing happening. What's your advice for people? What do you tell people as we're coming to a close here?
Yeah. So the number one mistake that people make with CPS is thinking that I'm a good parent. I've done nothing wrong. Okay. So, maybe you start homeschooling your kids because like Seth said, we're getting to a point in America where everybody's starting to do that. Well, maybe you have that nosy Karen neighbor who all of a sudden sees Johnny out in the backyard every day playing at noon and goes, well, Johnny's normally at school. Now he's in the backyard playing. Maybe CPS should be called. They call CPS. And you go, I've done nothing wrong. Sure. Can I come in? Yeah, absolutely. Now, once you open that door, okay, clothes are unfolded. Clothes are folded, aren't folded. They're laying on your couch. You got a brand new puppy and it just happened to pee because you haven't let it out and it's a brand new puppy. That's what puppies do. You got dishes in the sink. You got crayon on the walls. It doesn't matter. They are going through this checklist. And once they check enough boxes, you then qualify as a neglectful parent. And then you are in the system. Once you are in that system, it is designed for you to fail. And if you make enough mistakes because you work 2 jobs and you're just trying to keep a roof over your kid's head and you miss a class, the next thing you know, they're coming to take your child. Then you're fighting for a year, fighting for your child's life to actually get it back. So if they don't have a warrant, you do not have to let them into your home. Okay. So if CPS shows up at your house, there's a lot of great educational materials. I would start with this documentary. And if you are same thing, if you're fighting with your ex, right? Or you're fighting with your significant other because you were never married and you had a kid together and you're breaking up and you think, I'm going to call CPS because I'm going to get the upper hand. You're not going to get the upper hand. They're going to come after you for allowing that man in the child's life in the first place. And then you're both going to lose your child. So there's never unless your child is getting physically abused and you have no other choice, there is never a solution where calling CPS is the right call. So I hope that first and foremost, if you have a kid, if you're in a rocky relationship, like you guys should both sit down and watch this documentary, even if you guys are broken up or getting ready to break up, because you just need to realize how evil this machine is. And once you start that, once you open, if you knock on the devil's door long enough, eventually he's going to answer. And this is one door that you definitely don't want to knock on. So the best thing that you can do is just, share this film, watch it, educate yourselves. I've said this for the most time. Like every time I was having this conversation with Steph before he started, right? Like every time I make a documentary, I think this one's going to be the most viral, right? This one, because we're always helping more and more kids, and a film like this comes out and we've only got 870,000 views. I was expecting 5 to 10 million. The only time we force our government to go a new avenue is when we embarrass them, right? When it becomes so abundantly obvious to the masses that every time that Robert Kennedy goes out in public, everybody's asking him about what he's done about CPS, like they are about the vaccines, right? we force them to make change. So if we get enough attention on this film and enough people see this and it goes viral enough, we're a Rogan tweet, Elon tweet away from this thing doing 5 or 10 million. That could literally change the course of history, at least for the children of our country that are going to get kidnapped and taken by our government. There is an 800% higher probability that if a kid is adopted out to a gay couple, that it came through the foster care system. We're seeing this massive explosion of all these gay couples online taking selfies and photos, and they're in the hospital with a brand newborn baby. There is an 800% higher probability that that kid did not come from just some random one of their friends who's like, yeah, I don't want to have this kid. I want to give it up for adoption. Here's my baby. No, most parents who give up their children for adoption, they want it to go to the best family. They want it to go to somebody that can't provide a life that they could for the child, not a gay couple. Those gay couples that are adopting kids, most of them are coming through the foster care system. And that's how evil this system has become.
Incredible. One last page I'm going to bring up. You have a Give, Send, Go. So we've talked about how important getting this information out is. Obviously, sharing this information is really important. If you're watching or listening and you want to support Ryan directly, there's a Give, Send, Go link, which will be in the description. Obviously, money always helps to further these things. I know that you're not someone that's just taking this money and running. You're pumping it into new documentaries, new information. So also just encourage people that if you found this conversation moving or important, this is a great way to show that. So Ryan, it's been good. We've already gone well past an hour, but it's so so easy to talk to you. I appreciate what you're doing, man, and I thank you for just giving us your time today. And yeah, just keep fighting, man. I'm here beside you if you need anything. Thank you.
Always are, man. I greatly appreciate it, Seth. Thank you so much. God bless you and your family.
Thank you.